Today, we need to unpack a serious problem with Desperate Housewives. The husbands are a rarely acknowledged but very prominent issue in this show because there is a serious imbalance here in terms of standards, expectations, emotional labor and reciprocation when you compare how they are portrayed with their wives. And I wanted to talk about this today because this is a huge issue in the show. Some of the messages sent about marriage in Desperate Housewives were honestly so bizarre, convoluted, and really problematic. So we have lots of men in this show who there's lots of stereotypes thrown out about them being sex-driven, sex addicts who have no control over their emotions, but the show didn't do much to change this messaging or revert it or question it. So the message sent is that this is like normal, or that this is what we're supposed to think of it. The show gave us 4 women. Bree is the hyper-competent homemaker. Gabby is the glamorous trophy wife. Lynette is the overworked stay-at-home mum. And Susan, well, even Susan is a mess, but she's trying to do better. And she was really jilted in her first marriage. But the husbands, they mostly coast. The bar is literally in hell for them, and they don't need to do much to be seen as exceptional because the expectations for their behavior are literally so baseline. Like, we're talking basic respect, emotional maturity, accountability, and gentleness. It's really difficult to rank them because honestly, they all have so many issues that it's actually really hard to pinpoint. Like, even Orson, I was like, wow, he's way worse than I realized. But I think overall, when I look at the data, Tom Scavo was the worst. So let's talk about him first.
What are you doing? I need your help. Preston can't find his shoe.
I put it in the oven.
Tom Scavo is the nice guy who wasn't really nice. There's a lot of issues here around accountability and consent in regards to Tom. And we're basically shown that he's a piece of shit in the pilot episode and he's being very disrespectful. But the weird thing is that it didn't seem to get much better from then onwards. Tom is charming for sure. Like, he's a charismatic kind of guy, but let's be honest, Lynette was practically raising 5 kids by herself because one of them was her husband. He was a child. He was a liability and not an asset. And he wasn't really contributing in any way. Like, he's opening a restaurant, but he doesn't even cook at home. Why is he opening a restaurant? This man wasn't equipped emotionally, but nor was he really helping spiritually or with the housework, with the domestic stuff, or even career-wise. He was messing up at multiple points. He was a drag down in every single element that a person can be a drag. And the interesting thing about this show is that a lot of the men's behavior being highly incompetent or even using weaponized incompetence like Tom, it's never really something where they take accountability. By the end of the show, Tom takes responsibility for some things he did wrong and he grows up in a lot of regards, but it took way too long. And I hate the ride or die narrative that this sends, which women have been brainwashed in, not just through their relationships with men in society, but in the media too, where we're told that we're a bad person if we don't tolerate a man's behavior, that we have to learn together, we have to grow together, we have to sit while he does disrespect after disrespect after disrespect, and we have to sit there and take it, or we don't love him enough. And we basically have to sacrifice our mental health and lower our standards until finally the guy learns and changes and becomes the man that we needed him to be, regardless of how long it takes or how many times we had to repeat ourselves or how many times that guy makes us cry. The message society sends is that it's fine, as long as he gets there in the end, it will all be worth it. And realistically, Tom took way too long to fix things that Lynette was criticizing him on. Because here's the thing about Tom Scavo. he doesn't listen. This is the first issue with Tom, is that Lynette was very, very clear about certain expectations she had that weren't being met by him, the fact that she was tired all the time and overworked, or that she needed him to contribute more, and he was never really pulling his weight. He was a very, very lazy man who wouldn't really do much or contribute much, but then he would get mad when there were repercussions for his actions, or when she didn't want to have sex with him, or when she resented him. And yet when she failed in some way, or she messed up, or she wasn't really at the standard he expected, he was very, very critical of her. And that's the thing about Tom, is it's not just the fact that he messed up, because we all mess up sometimes, we're humans, right? It's normal to fail. It's the fact that he took not only so long to change, but throughout that entire process, he never really acknowledged that he was the core of most of the issues in the relationship, that it was fully on him, that it was his fault, that she wasn't responsible. He was really sort of pushing a lot of the issues onto her and making her do the emotional labor, and also to give her that feeling of emotional responsibility. So at no point was he ever saying, you know what, you've been a great wife and I'm just not up to scratch. No, he was insecure, he was demanding, he was a man-child, he was lazy, but then the worst part is he wasn't even really learning from that. Like, he wasn't even understanding the consequences of his actions on her and really taking responsibility fully and going, yep, this is on me, I'm a loser. Like, in some way, he always tried to wrap her up into it as if it's her responsibility to fix these issues in the relationship. And a lot of the time when he talked to other people about Lynette, he would agree with them that she was controlling and too much, and he would say, oh, but I'm so compassionate because she had a traumatic childhood, so I do my best to cope with it. So in this very, very narcissistic way and a deeply manipulative way to the outside world, he would frame it as if he was a good guy doing all this to help her and she just had control issues. He would allow the public perception of their relationship to be like this, but behind the scenes, he was never actually doing anything or pulling his own weight. So the way he talked about and presented the relationship from the outside was actually completely different to how he treated her within the relationship. Like, just in general, just forget the fact that it's a TV show, just if he was a real guy in real life, would you want to date someone like that? The answer is honestly no, because he's negative, he's good looking, he literally has nothing else. He's whinging, he's complaining, he doesn't take care of himself, he doesn't take care of his wife, he has no idea how to manage the kids. And honestly, Lynette would have been better off as a single mum. She married the wrong man because she constantly had to do things for him, even in regards to managing the kids, because he didn't have good control over them. Lynette was exhausted, she was burnt out, she was drained, and her husband was part of the drain. He wasn't fundamentally making her life easier, he was making it harder. I can guarantee you, if Lynette wrote out like a list of things that happened that week with Tom, what she did and what he did and how he contributed, she would have found fucking nothing. He was insecure, he brought her down, he was jealous of her, he didn't support her with the career, he didn't really know what he was doing with the household stuff. There was no way he was really trying to make her life easier or bring value to her life. He was literally treating her like a live-in maid to use whenever he wanted. Like, that's not a partnership. I've never seen a TV character so awful, so entitled, and so chill and laissez-faire about what he's putting her body through when he keeps asking that they have more children. Like, he truly used her, and she was just bled dry by the end of the show. Like, she was so exhausted. And the saddest part is that at no point did she just leave much earlier. Like, for season after season, she was just sitting there and feeling like she just had to take it and that she had to tolerate it. And at no actual point was she going, you know what, I deserve better than that, I'm going to leave. Like, he was just sat there and whinging and being a negative leech. And for most of the show, she's just running around packing his sandwiches like he's a toddler and trying to accommodate him. And I don't know how this happened in general, of treating grown men like they're 5-year-olds, but he knew like what was required. He heard her, he wasn't deaf. Like, when she said multiple times, I'm upset about something, he did hear her. He just didn't want to change, but he very much had heard her. Like, she was telling him a lot of things that upset her in this relationship. but he just was choosing not to implement the feedback. Like he knew very well like her position on things and what bothered her, but he was choosing not to change. She sacrificed her whole career basically to support his, even though she was bored and aimless. And the second she wanted to work again, he acted like she was abandoning the family. And on top of that, he couldn't cope with being a stay-at-home dad for like 2 weeks. The house was a mess. He had no system in order. He couldn't keep on top of it. So he really had no respect or admiration for her and how much work she put in. Even when Tom finally did get a dream job, Lynette ended up doing most of the parenting and the emotional heavy lifting. And I think the worst kind of emotional labor is the one that's so normalized that you get so used to, you forget that you're even doing it, which was the case with Lynette. Like they'd so fallen into these patterns and these dynamics in their relationship where he was coming to her with things to fix and she was fixing them, that it's like slowly boiling water. And I don't think that she realized until really far into the relationship how skewed the whole dynamic was, that he couldn't even cook or clean or do basic things, and he was basically like a man-child. But yet somehow the relationship with him, the show frames as being something quite special and worth fighting for. Like the lengths Lynette goes to get Tom back after the separation is crazy. She's putting in the work to go and get him back. She is trying to make this work. She's fighting for this relationship. And she's not just divorcing him and moving on. There were so many ways in which Tom was very focused on his own needs and what he wanted, and so he didn't care how it affected Lynette. For example, they had this whole date planned for their anniversary. An idea she suggested was that she wanted to stay home and do something chill because she was exhausted and burnt out all the time. But Tom basically wanted them to go out and do all these cool things. Lynette was like, oh, I don't want to, like, I'm tired. And she ended up forcing herself to do it and then admitting like, okay, well, to be fair, this was fun. Like maybe even when you're not in the mood, to keep the spark alive, it's a good thing to still go out and do dates and put effort into the relationship. I don't know what kind of a message the show was trying to send here, but whatever it was that they were going for, it did not land. You could really see that this show was written by men, because it doesn't, this is, no woman would behave like that. There is nothing wrong with just staying at home when you're feeling tired and connecting and watching a movie. And by the way, when you know that someone feels a certain way and they raise a boundary or they share something they want, like, oh, I love it when you cook for me at home, or oh, I just want to like stay in tonight, and you overrule it because you think that what you're doing is like a good decision, or you think you know better, that's not love. That's literally being selfish and controlling because you're doing what you want to do for the anniversary. It's like if you know that your wife hates eating out at restaurants, or that she doesn't like buying clothes, like she's not a big shopper, but you're framing it as this romantic gesture and you keep buying her all these fancy clothes and taking her to restaurants, that is not you being gentlemanly and considerate. Because is it really considerate if you know that she doesn't like it and you go and you organize it anyway? I'd say it's actually not listening, not truly hearing her and being emotionally attuned to her needs, and not really reading the room. And the message it sends when Lynette agrees to this kind of date at the end of the episode is that sometimes you need to overrule your own choices and autonomy in order to accommodate someone even if you're exhausted. And this is like such a common theme in their relationship, where Lynette's genuine needs and autonomy are not heard and they are literally overruled. And it is so, I hate to use this word like to throw it around, but like it is so misogynistic. That's the only way to put it. It keeps coming through multiple times in the show. In the pilot episode where she doesn't want sex and is pressuring her. This challenge that he comes up with to bring the couple together and emotionally connect. And basically part of the challenge is that you sleep together every single day. And Lynette's getting really tired and doesn't want to do it anymore. And she's like, I don't have the capacity for this. I don't have the endurance. And Tom acts like really offended and says, oh, so my ideas aren't important to you. So he gaslights her, he blames her, he makes her feel like she's doing something wrong because she doesn't have this same capacity. And then he depletes her, and then he gets mad when she has no energy for him. It's completely unfair. It's not even like, oh, he's the career man and he brings home the money and she, you know, looks after the kids. It was completely unbalanced. She was doing everything. I don't believe that this is the kind of relationship that the show should have led us to believe was cute for so long, especially because he's never really truly held accountable. In fact, he doesn't want to be, and he wants to believe himself to be the victim. That's not true change. And the thing is, I felt like a lot of the times when Tom seemed to change, it was like towards the end when Lynette was like, yeah, I'm done and I'm leaving. Or, yeah, I'm gonna leave you for a while. I'm walking away. And I just feel like earlier in the relationship, if someone mentions that there's a problem or they mention that something bothers them, like whether you're hurtful with your words or whether you're a bit aggressive or you've got some sort of issue, maybe you don't communicate well. Humans don't like change, I understand that, but you really need to listen when your wife is telling you something, in Lynette's case. And the thing is that it shouldn't take you hitting rock bottom or the woman giving you an ultimatum or threatening to leave for you to then feel forced to change something. And thing is, humans like being comfortable. We like things being what we expect. But in order to have a healthy relationship, the whole basis of that is you're going to be pushing each other all the time. You're going to be growing. You're going to be making mistakes. You're going to be learning. You're going to be making up. You're going to be communicating how to improve. But the whole basis of that is like some change, right? And that's fine. But it's a shame when your ego gets in the way and you don't listen to feedback earlier, because Lynette was very, very clear multiple times about Tom being messy or being bad with the kids or certain expectations that she had, where she basically wanted him to grow up, become a man, step up and take some responsibility, and he wasn't listening. And the show framed it as kind of romantic when he eventually started improving, but I don't find it very sexy or romantic when it takes such a dramatic external stimuli or the girl threatening to leave or threatening to do something really bad for the guy to kind of wake up and then panic. Like, it shouldn't be something that dramatic where everything blows up in your face for the guy to finally be like, okay, well, since it doesn't look like I have any other option, then I want to change. Because that's the thing. The show sent us this narrative that you can maybe change a man with multiple of the guys in the show, not just Tom, but you can't. You cannot change a person. If you can't change them, just change to someone else. Do you know what I mean? Because you can give feedback, but if you've mentioned the feedback 3 times and you've sort of talked it through and you're not noticing any genuine remorse from them and then genuine accountability fully and then behavioral changes, if you don't see any of those 3 things, it's done. And Lynette was telling him, he just wasn't listening, but she was telling him that she was exhausted and burnt out and that he wasn't basically being the man that he needed to be, that he was failing as a man, failing to provide, failing to protect, failing in every possible way that you can fail as a man. And yes, I know I'm going off and I'm getting heated, but I genuinely despise this character. Like everyone, my whole family watched this show with me, and Tom was their least favorite character in this show because he is such a leechy, negative energy that really like drags down the fun of the show, because he is always complaining, but then he never does anything to really take responsibility of his life or act and change. And that's the thing, is Lynette was hoping that he would just be a better husband and show up, but you can't change a person. Like, unless they're working out, going to therapy, actively improving themselves, doing self-development, you can't bulldoze them into change. Like, unless they genuinely want to and they understand what they've done wrong, being sorry isn't enough. And that's the thing about Tom, is that he wasn't even sorry. That's the crazy thing. It's not like he felt bad, but he didn't really have the tools, he wasn't equipped to fix it. He didn't feel bad, and he wasn't making effort to change because he was benefiting from this dynamic he had with Lynette, where she was doing everything for him. He had a good deal. He had a really, really good deal, and he knew it. Tom is sometimes framed as the better husband because he's not cheating on her throughout the show or something like that, or he's not physically assaulting her or whatever, but it actually isn't a good way to look at it, because he was constantly undermining Lynette, emotionally burdening her. And when she decided to go back to the workplace, she actually took a job that he had interviewed for, but he failed the interview and he didn't seem like he wanted it. And since she wanted to step up and in a sense be the breadwinner, be the provider, she took the opportunity for the job. And he got really offended. He was trying to compete with her. He was threatened by her success and he was like, no, that job's mine actually. Like, you don't have a right to come in and take it. It was meant for me. That's the crazy thing, is she sets him up in so many ways and provides for him. And then he was emasculated by that because he didn't want to see her as a provider or as someone that had any kind of power over him. And this is a really interesting pattern in the show where when the woman is self-sufficient or succeeding in any way, the male ego is so threatened that they don't want to feel that she's succeeding. So they're not motivating her. It's actually the opposite. They're actually discouraging her and feeling like their role is undervalued in the relationship, feeling that maybe this says something bad about them and their success, that their wife is succeeding. So every single one of the women in this show basically married wrong, except for maybe Susan, because they're marrying men who are not, like, they're dating down. They're dating men that literally are not supporting them and their career ambitions, and are making them feel bad for wanting to contribute to the family. And that's the funny thing, is when you love someone, or you're a woman who loves a man, let's say, over time you do want to buy him nice things, you enjoy spoiling him, and you enjoy treating him or doing nice things for him too. Like, it's not just one way. You can enjoy buying him a birthday present and looking after him in a way. Like, it's not just a thing a man does for a woman. And it seems like this part of the show hasn't aged well. It's this very traditional gender role way of looking at it, that there's only one way to show up in a relationship and to provide for a woman, and that only the man should provide. Because unfortunately, it's sent this very like outdated message in this show. And ultimately, what does that say about these male characters? It's coming down to ego and control. They feel like they have less power over her when she has full financial autonomy and is making financial decisions. And I think that is extremely worrying in itself, because they shouldn't be viewing it as a threat. They shouldn't be using their own career and the money they're bringing in as a sort of power or control to leverage over her. That is not how a healthy relationship should work. They should be a team. They should be happy to see if she wants to work and she wants to bring some money in, or take them out for dinner, or in Lynette's case, get back into the workforce. At no point did I feel that Tom truly supported Lynette's ambitions. Tom is the textbook example of just the useless husband, where so many women think that they need to be taking on the emotional responsibility in the relationship and basically be his mum. And he's also the most quietly draining, and that's what makes him so familiar. You don't have to scream at your wife or rage or have fits of anger in order to be a bad husband. Sometimes just being passive, quiet, useless, not taking responsibility, inconsistent, and unwilling to step up, that is enough to wreck a marriage. Sometimes you literally don't need any more than that. He also had a lot of weaponized incompetence. Tom would regularly pretend to not know how to manage the household, that Lynette just does it better than him. And often when something's hard, he backs off and he hands the responsibility to Lynette. Like, he expects applause for babysitting his own kids. He quits his job on a whim to pursue these crazy dreams without discussing it with Lynette. And this is what he does a lot in this very sort of patriarchal way, where he just makes decisions without treating her as if she's involved in these decisions. And everyone calls Lynette controlling, but Tom was equally controlling. He would go and buy them a house without checking with her first if she liked it. He would go and decide to be a musician without telling her, or open a pizza place without really checking with her. And thing is, it's her money too. He will make decisions, or big financial decisions like quitting his job, but thing is that she's also affected by that too. Yet he was acting as if it was his money. And that's the thing, is that's not a relationship. Like, as great as it is to be independent, when you're in a relationship with someone, you have to compromise. It can't just be you carrying on with your usual routine and my way or the highway. Like, no, you're married now. You've joined your life with this person. And therefore, I think it's just the kind, mature, respectful thing to do, to consult them and ask them their opinion rather than bulldozing ahead with decisions. I don't believe that this is respectful. And these things can show up way earlier in relationships too, where a man is subtly showing dominance and being dominating. Like if he's dating a woman and, for example, someone invites them to a New Year's event and he tells them, no thanks, like my girlfriend and I are actually going to spend New Year's together, so there's no need for us to go to that party, right? But thanks for the offer. And then like a month later, he lets his girlfriend know, or like a week later, after the fact, after the decision has been made. That's a micro example of how it can show up early on, even when you're not married. Because she'll be like, oh, well, I actually didn't want to be alone on New Year's. I wanted to go to a party. Like, call that guy back and tell him we do want to go and we accept the invitation. You can't just bulldoze and walk over things because it suits you without asking your partner what is correct for them. This is a selfish way of being. And I think often when you date a guy like this, you think, oh, he's just super independent. It's taking him a while to adjust to, you know, the relationship and he's not used to it. But no, like that's him literally being selfish. Another thing that Tom had was a general resentment of Lynette's competence. Rather than being proud of her and lifting her up, he was happy to have her suffer. No man that truly loves you is going to be okay with you suffering. He'll want to take care of you if he truly loves you. Like he'll want to lift you up and make your life better. But in Tom's case, he didn't care how exhausted and drained Lynette was. And he was actually very threatened by how capable she was around the house, around her work ethic and leadership. And he often sabotaged her authority in professional settings. And he pouts and resents when she gets promotions or success when he didn't. Tom wants a strong woman until he actually has one. And this is the case with so many men, is they think that they want this and then they actually get a baddie and they don't know how to handle the baddie, you know? And this can go the other way too, where a woman says that she wants like a really successful, hardworking guy, but then she gets mad when he's working a lot and isn't always available for her. So sometimes you don't realize how you feel until you actually experience it in the relationship. Another thing is emotional imbalance and guilt tripping. So whenever Lynette stands up for herself in any capacity or says that maybe she's too tired to have sex, the sex thing is a big problem. Like Tom's just constantly pushing this on her. Tom acts really hurt or betrayed. Like he doesn't listen. He often sulks or retreats, and it forces her to be the one to chase him down and try and repair the emotional damage. So again, he gets to just walk away and take no emotional responsibility, and she's the one that panics and has to do the planning and the fixing and try and reassure him and attend to his emotional wounds and run after him. It's very, very rare when they have an argument that they can just have it and Tom makes space for Lynette's emotions. It normally leads to him playing the victim or reminding her that he's suffering too and turning it around in some capacity. And another thing is obviously Tom cheated on her, so that we've got that whole thing of him feeling like she's not making time for him or investing in him sexually, but she's often so exhausted that she just doesn't want to. And he often uses things like having a back injury as an excuse to try and guilt trip her into having sex with him. And he's very, very coercive. No one talks enough about like coercive control in marriages because we like to think that it only happens in dating, but there was absolutely that coercive control where he didn't really care if she was in the mood or not. He was just complaining and being like, oh, but can't you just do this one thing for me because I'm so depressed because I've got a back injury. And he was just treating her basically as like a personal assistant. He was really, really bad for her. And the interesting thing about the show is they brought in his mum, and it was very explicit in the show. They tied it back to his mum, who is not nice to Lynette at all. And we basically learned that this is a pattern in the Scavo family where the mums do everything for their sons and the sons never really need to do anything. They're always taken care of, and so they never really understand or value the concept of hard work because someone's been basically their personal caretaker, attending to them all the time, and they've never needed to just man up and take some responsibility and actually treat their wives with kindness, because from their point of view, any woman in their life was just there to basically serve them and cater to them, and they could just be ungrateful and reap the rewards without really appreciating the woman that's putting all this time in to help them. And I do think that something really important is to see, if it's something that matters to you, how a man actually relates to his mother, like if they have a good relationship or if they don't. Because if he resents his mother deeply, he may end up resenting you at some point unless he works in it. Or if he is always, in a way, expecting his mother to do things for him, and she's just always so available and she dotes on him, you know, she never gives him any responsibility, then it's a sign of the kind of way that he relates to women and the way that he perceives their role and what they're supposed to do for him. So he'll probably end up, in Tom's case, like treating you from this very, very selfish and inflexible mindset. Tom often weaponized pity when he didn't get what he wanted, or just going down some rabbit hole of complaints and depression. And he even made his mental health spirals with this sort of exaggerated pity me thing something again for Lynette to attend to. He made any anxiety he had or any anger he had about his career her problem. He would literally go and dump it directly on her for her to solve. And it's a bit of an extreme case, like sometimes people do it in a more subtle way than that, but Tom's was literally so extreme. And Lynette is often labeled as controlling or too much and too tense, but anyone would be controlling and tense when you're the only one that has any capability, and when you're constantly the one that has to step up for everyone else because no one else is doing anything and you have zero support. Tom would often fight Lynette on things or disagree with her in the way that she managed things, but often he would end up realizing that she was right and they would all end up doing what Lynette had requested in the first place. And this again reminded me of how unhealed Tom in general is in his masculinity, because he's so easily threatened and not able to just admit that there are some things that Lynette knows how to do that she will just do better than him. He had such a problem with just admitting, you know what, my wife's freaking amazing, she's so capable, she's so intuitive, she really knows what's best for the boys, and I'm going to kind of step back and allow her to do it because she's just better at me than this. Like, that's a sign of being a secure person, is knowing that you don't need to know everything all the time or be right all the time. And it's okay to acknowledge that your wife is just really capable and really good at this stuff. But instead he would often try and like undermine her efforts to do things, or he would come in with his own deluded opinion about how he thought things should work. And he often used work as an excuse, like as an excuse to cop out, because he'd be like, oh, I'm tired from work, so that's it, I've hit my capacity for today, you know, I'm done. And he wouldn't really recognize what she was doing at home, as actual hard work. He would just go to his job, pay the bills, have this very like steady, reliable routine, and then he would come home. I really, really hated the way that Lynette was always on eggshells around him, because she was so worried about saying something that would like rub his fragile ego the wrong way or cause him to freak out. So she was often very, very careful with how she raised feedback or how she asked for things in case it would upset him or come off in the wrong way, which I just think is the worst sign of clearly what is such a toxic and unhealthy relationship, that you don't feel okay just casually voicing something with your partner because they don't trust you and you know that they're going to read into it the wrong way. Like, she had to tiptoe around his ego just in the off chance that what she would say would upset him. Lynette even said that when they first started dating, he had very, very sexist, outdated views. So they're basically admitting that he actually grew into it more in the relationship and he was even worse before. There was way too much yelling going on. He often raised his voice at her, and ultimately, when I look at the trajectory of this relationship, it was very, very toxic. He did not treat her with respect. He did not treat her like a lady. He was very, very bitter and ungrateful towards her for everything that she did for him and the boys. And he did not really put his ego aside in most of the interactions. He made his mental health and his personal failings and his stress her problem, because he had no emotional regulation whatsoever. So he literally made it her responsibility to cater to his needs. And sorry, but regardless of how much you love someone or you care for them, you cannot help them with that stuff. Like, that's their job to fix, that's on them, and they shouldn't be dumping it on their partner.
Yeah, maybe a great quarterback. Like, I don't know, Manning.
Next, we have Mike Delfino, Susan's husband. Mike Delfino is the perfect example of the savior complex guy. He's definitely the least bad out of all the husbands. He's a very good, charming partner. He's very, very sweet. He's very, very obsessed with Susan. He really wants the best for her, and I would say that overall, he was very like emotionally regulated. He didn't flip out at her a lot, and he often spoke to her in a calm way. He was pretty level-headed. He didn't get jealous easily. He let her do her own thing. He wasn't controlling. So there were a lot of ways in which Mike was a very, very grounded and mature partner. He'd obviously had like some life experience and some dating experience. So he also had worked through some of his issues in his past, and he was more grounded, I would say. He knew how to treat a woman better, and he did his best to be respectful. So I would say she did pretty well with Mike. But the interesting thing is that even Mike is portrayed as the best one out of all the husbands, but Mike himself still had a ton of issues. Like, sure, he was non-controlling, he was steady and dependable, he was a man of few words, and he was very, very protective of Susan and Julie. He did his best to take accountability when he made mistakes, but his entire career arc begins with deception. Like, he moves on to Wisteria Lane as a private investigator, and he's lying to Susan about his real intentions there for a majority of their early relationship. He rarely talks about his feelings, and he's often keeping secrets. He often responds to Susan's emotional needs with frustration, or he checks out because he doesn't quite have the capacity to be able to sit and hold space for that. And they at one point faced basically financial ruin because he was going into debt and he wasn't telling her about it. He was stacking it up and up and up, and he wasn't filling her in. So Susan ends up doing adult webcam work to make ends meet. And I thought what was so interesting about that is Susan wanted a partnership. She wanted them to talk with each other and resolve issues together and treat it like a team. But Mike had this sort of savior complex around, oh, I'm meant to be the man. I shouldn't be failing like this. I should be providing. And he had all this shame, and he didn't want to look like a loser in front of her. So he was hiding like how scared he was because he didn't want to appear weak. And it makes sense in theory. When you like a girl, you don't want to be complaining to her. Like, you want to seem like the strong figure. But the problem with that is then Susan felt lied to. Like, she was out of the loop. She had no idea what was going on. She felt hurt. Like, he was shutting her out of important life decisions and hiding things from her that were important, that did concern her too. So it wasn't really okay. Like, she had a right to know because it's her life too. And he wasn't going to fix it basically unless he seriously got some help. And Susan, thing is, she loved him. She was okay with helping. She wanted to be filled in on what was going on, and she would have helped if she knew what was going on. She just didn't understand the situation. And I think that's the problem we see a lot of the time in relationships, and that's the kind of message that this show sent, which I found quite problematic, which is that the man has to just be fully the provider, to the point that if he's going through something, he shouldn't even tell his wife about it. Like, he needs to hide it. And Mike then gets very emasculated when Susan tries to step in and help. Like, I didn't ask you to do that, stay out of it, Susan. And again, this isn't just because they're sweet guys and they want to be providers and they wish they could be more. To me, this seemed like a very, very worrying message to send of, I'm a loser if my girlfriend wants to step in and help me. Like, I'm a loser. I'm a failure as a man, and any good career position I have is me asserting power and control over her. And if she's becoming successful or making money or stepping in, it makes me feel weaker as a man. I feel like she's got too much power and independence, and I'm not okay to see her thriving and being able to take care of me. And that's the problem with these attitudes, is that multiple men on the show, including Carlos, do this, where they get genuinely triggered when their woman is able to be intelligent and self-sufficient and take care of them or take care of the family. And There's nothing wrong with being a provider man, but I find this mindset also very insulting because ultimately you're questioning like her capacity to succeed and her intelligence. And the truth is that like she's not a child. She's probably very, very capable of getting out there and supporting the family. And if you are really confident and secure in your role as a man and what you were bringing to the relationship, like truly happy with your career, you wouldn't feel threatened if she was also doing well in her career and wanted to contribute in some way, especially if it makes her feel good in doing so and she genuinely wants to. Overall, I think the 2000s when this show came out, it was a very, very misogynistic time for TV shows. So there was this expectation that you had to sit and just endure this kind of behavior from men, and you had to just put up with it and in a way even convince yourself it's what you want. And at no point are you actually allowed to, or is it acceptable for you to actually cut off and walk away. That you just have to be endlessly forgiving, endlessly tolerating, endlessly making excuses, and that if they're not listening, it's probably because you didn't say it loud enough and you need to repeat again a second time. When most of the time, overall in these relationships, the guys were just not listening when their partners very, very coherently and very, very calmly and intelligently explain something to them.
I'm gonna go read porn in Braille.
The next guy I want to talk about is Carlos, who I like to call the creepy control freak. Now, Carlos had, I would say, the most character development out of all the husbands, and he definitely had the most lessons and the most learning, and he became far more responsible overall and a far better husband by the end than he was at the beginning of the show. And he had the most well-explained, well-fleshed out arc overall. And he and Gabby definitely were very happy in their relationship together at the end, and they were relating in a less toxic and unhealthy way, and they were responding more to calmness and softness by the end of the show. They were being more gentle and they trusted each other more. However, I think there's still a million issues with Carlos that should not be swept under the rug, and that should absolutely still be talked about regardless of him making some improvements in his character arc. Because here's the thing, Carlos literally blinded himself with pride and ego. He objectified Gabby from day one and treated her like an object that he had won. And in the first 2 seasons of the show, their relationship is absolutely just abusive and unhealthy. Like, he's physically violent with her, he's raising his voice at her, he doesn't care about her needs at all, which is why she's cheating. And he, whenever he wants to make up to her in some way or prove something, or apologize, he brings her superficial materialistic gifts. And that's the same thing that we see other husbands in the show doing, is just throwing gifts and money at it when they want to fix something. But there's a real lack of actual growth, apologies, and change and accountability. And that's the thing, when Gabby acted out because she was bored or lonely or maybe insecure and didn't feel emotionally attended to, he just reacted to her and blamed her, and he was like, oh, you did this, but he wouldn't actually do any introspection. And again, I find this the most annoying thing, is when a man is dating a woman or a woman is dating a man, they do something shitty or they're emotionally neglecting their partner, and their partner has a big blow up where they get upset or hurt, and they focus more on their partner's reaction and how wrong their reaction was than what their behavior was that triggered that emotional response in the first place. Like, he would do this all the time. Like, she would get upset and cheat, and he'd be like, why are you cheating? Why are you cheating? Or, oh, why are you not giving me the same attention you used to? Why are you not having sex with me? But he wouldn't think at all, zero self-awareness about maybe whether something he had done had actually upset her and made her feel that way, because it's just easier to point fingers and to blame the other person than to actually take some responsibility and admit that maybe, yes, you failed and you messed it up and it's completely your problem. But Carlos didn't do that, especially in seasons 1 and 2. He literally did not care about Gabby's needs, and he treated her as a little sex object that often he would parade around and allow her to get sexually harassed in front of his colleagues, and he didn't care as long as he secured a good business deal. He was always prioritizing business and money over Gabby and any kind of superficial success to maintain her lifestyle. But while she loved the lifestyle, she wasn't feeling emotionally attended to in the relationship, and she was not getting enough affection or attention. And he really sexualized her. And again, he had this weird attitude of just being sex obsessed and thinking about sex all the time, but then there wasn't really much else to it, kind of similar to Tom. He believed fundamentally that love could be bought, and he was also very possessive and controlling if Gabby was showing interest in other men, for example, but to a weird extent where he seemed highly insecure, and it would often culminate in physical violence or him being very aggressive and beating people up. And although he claimed that he didn't want to be that kind of guy and this didn't really speak to his character, still later on in the show he was resorting to physical violence and being aggressive with people. And Gabby had to really fight for her autonomy every step of the way. She had to fight and push for it, because ultimately he wasn't actually respecting her autonomy, because he was just controlling her. He would just buy her expensive things and gifts to keep her complacent, but he never was giving her actual freedom. His default reaction to anything bad happening or to emotional discomfort was violence or control, and never just communicating openly and gently with her. He thought that because he provided financially or bought her things, that he was entitled to her body, her time, her attention, her love, and good behavior. He weaponized religion and tried to use that as a sort of lens to shame her and judge her, and it all came off as just another way to be controlling. By the later seasons, yes, he did change and he became overall more empathetic and less reactive, but I don't like the message that this show sent, that women should have to sit there and take it and suffer for years while waiting for a man to just get his shit together and grow up. Gabby had to endure a lot of shit before Carlos evolved, which is something that happens far too much in fiction and in real life. Like, I understand that she messed up too, but she was spending a majority of the time basically hoping that he would change and get better, and he wasn't. And he knew he had a baddie, like he bagged a baddie. He wanted someone beautiful and sexy and confident and who got male attention, and someone desirable like a trophy wife. But then he got mad when men wanted her and she was desirable, and she knew that she had options. And it took actually a lot of bad things happening in the relationship, including the complete failure of his career and him getting caught out for certain crimes he committed, for him to start changing and becoming a softer person. Like, he had to lose everything to gain everything. And at one point, Gabby was actually earning more in the relationship, and she was saying, don't worry about it, basically, babe, I've got it covered. And she was really, really happy to pay for things and to treat him to a nice dinner. And he got really, really mad about that. He felt like she had too much power and too much control over him. And yet again, the same thing happened with him as it did with the other guys, where she was capable and winning and able to provide something. And he felt uncomfortable with that. Like, he didn't know his role anymore in the relationship as a man. He didn't know what he was bringing. And it made him feel uncomfortable that she was bringing so much. It feels like this show just thrived on male mediocrity. Like, there's no other way of putting it. Even though Gabby was very, very toxic herself and mistreated Carlos a lot at points in their marriage, or she could be very, very emotionally volatile and immature herself, I feel like we talk a lot about her, but often Carlos just gets brushed under the rug as like this passionate guy who just loves her so much, that he just cares so much, and that's why he treats her like that, because he cares so deeply. And he just wants to be with her. But that shouldn't be giving him the ability to just speak to her however he wants because he feels like it. That shouldn't be giving him any sort of right, even if they're married, to just treat her however he wants to treat her. And he also wasn't a very good dad. Like, Gabby was concerned about her daughter's weight, and Carlos was the one that just was not really seeing it. There were many, many problems there with how he parented the girls. Like, Gabby was very, very clear from the beginning, very, very explicitly, that she never wanted children, and children was just not something she wanted. She was even clear before marrying him that it just wasn't for her. And at some point he started bulldozing her into it, and even basically forcibly got her pregnant by tampering with her birth control, which is a massive violation of her bodily autonomy and rights. And it's just insanely manipulative and coercive to do that to someone, because you're basically saying that your opinions and your feelings matter more than theirs do, and you don't care how much they have to suffer as long as you get what you want. And because he had no ability to just be respectful and hold space for her emotions, when she was getting really, really upset about something, like losing someone that felt like a daughter to her, even if it was irrational, she was having genuine feelings, he wasn't really getting it. He was being really mean about it and not responding with empathy when she was upset. Like, he was shutting down because he was actually genuinely lacking empathy. So she's there crying and being upset, and his reaction is more like, oh, why are you being so emotional? Or I don't get why it's such a big deal. So this causes Gabby to feel further misunderstood, further alone, basically, in her own marriage, and then to just retreat further and further away because ultimately she's not being listened to. And I think this is like a big problem in the show overall with these guys. And I really liked Carlos's character development. I think because they actually gave some reasons to show why he changed, and they put certain really difficult obstacles in his path that forced him to confront himself a bit, or they put him through some really stressful situations, so he was kind of forced to step up and mature a bit. So that's why I prefer his character development the most, because they didn't just make it easy for him. But I still think that overall, when I look at all of these husbands, there is a lack of any of them really taking full accountability for everything they did. Like, they'll address some things they did wrong in their relationship and they'll talk it out and apologize, but then there'll be all this unaddressed stuff that they did that they never once face actual repercussions or consequences for. They think that they can just behave like this and treat their wives like this, and even the show itself doesn't give them actual consequences for their actions, or at the very least, the audience is left wondering, like, hang on a minute, was that question ever answered? Did they ever apologize for that? And you're there racking your brains like, wait, hang on. Did we ever resolve that plot point from season 2? Did he ever like reflect on that? Or was there any kind of growth? And then you realize that it was just kind of skipped over. And the problem is that it wasn't even any better with Brie. Because let's take a look at Rex Van de Kamp, her first husband, who I like to call Mr. Emotionally Dismissive.
Rex cries after he ejaculates.
Because Brie was a very, very powerful woman and very, very capable. And yes, she was a bitch at the beginning of the show, and I don't like how she raised her children, but she was also very, very competent and very, very good at a lot of things and highly skilled. And I can confidently say that her husbands or partners or men she dated were not respecting her, and they were not seeing the value that she brought. In fact, they would often use her and be very, very ungrateful for it. Now, Brie had a bunch of emotional issues at the start of the show, so it made sense as to why she chose Rex, because they both had a lot of issues. But I think it's really, really interesting how Rex was so cold and shut off from basically everything. And the funny thing is that he would often gang up with the kids against Brie in conversations, or diminish her or neg her or make jokes at her expense in front of the kids. And then they would be shocked that the kids didn't respect her, that the kids made fun of her, and the way Andrew spoke to her was appalling. But I think it's so interesting, because if you have a husband that fundamentally like does not respect you and does not really talk about you with reverence in front of other people, of course your children are going to pick up on that, because she'll go to make a point about parenting and you'll get in there, neg her, and you'll undermine her point. Like, she'll literally be there trying to explain something or say something that matters to her, say something that means something to her, and you get in there and you basically undermine her confidence. Like, you make her look stupid in front of the kids. I think it is this again can happen earlier in dating. Unfortunately, we didn't get loads of flashbacks to their early relationship, but I think that it is such a big red flag even early on in dating when you don't know the person very well, where you're hanging out with them and spending time with them, and maybe like you're at a social function or you're in front of family, and they make a comment that is meant to either mock you or embarrass you or just knock you down a peg. Like, whether it's making fun of maybe one of your passions or your preferences for something, they're like, oh, I disagree, you're wrong, like in front of someone else. So it's a kind of public humiliation, but not just private, but they're like, oh yeah, you're wrong in that. I disagree. That's stupid. Or they say something that insults you, like maybe it's your religion or something, and they kind of make fun of your religious beliefs in front of other people. This is such a sign of, I just think, a lack of respect for that person, or at the very least, a lack of care about how their words actually have an impact and could hurt the person that they're seeing. And this is a very, very difficult behavior to fix because it's fundamentally so hurtful. And there were many times that Bree was crying over Rex or feeling hurt privately because she didn't know how to express it. She'd been taught that it wasn't safe to express it, but those little comments from him would really affect her confidence and make her feel bad about herself. And I just don't think that this is a good sign, especially like if someone's criticizing you or being mean to you, and then your husband in public doesn't stand up to defend you in front of the others, but they go along with the joke. Such a massive red flag. Like, you should support your partner and defend them against all others. Like, if the kids were being disrespectful to Bree, regardless of Bree's issues, Rex should have been like, hey kids, stop that. That's your mother you're speaking to. But he didn't really like defend her in front of the children either, or other people. And same for her. Like, the relationship was just very, very unhealthy. And that's the thing about Bree, is that she had a lot of trauma with expressing herself and her feelings, and in general just releasing her emotions. And if her husband truly cared about her and wanted to do really better, I feel like he would be the one to remember that about her, and so be very gentle, knowing that she's sensitive, like to listen to her when she does share an emotion. But the problem is that Bree would get so nervous to share her emotions, she'd get really worked up, and eventually, because it was really hard for her at the beginning, she would finally get the courage, work it up and say, Rex, what you said earlier, it really hurt me. It really hurt me. It hurt my feelings. So she'd be brave enough to share this sort of vulnerability with him. And then he would be like, ugh, whatever, I'm going to bed. So he'd be literally trying to exit out of the conversation rather than resolve it. She'd be like, what? I'm trying to tell you I'm hurt. He's like, yo, what you're saying is dumb. Like, you being hurt by that is dumb. So he was always like invalidating her feelings, even when she did manage to share something that was important to her. And he wasn't really putting work into fixing the relationship and being really proactive with couples counseling and things like that. He didn't want to do the work, and he didn't really want to change. He just quietly resented her. He also didn't really make her feel like she could achieve everything she wanted. As we found out later in the show, she actually released a cookbook and it was really, really successful. So Bree was the kind of person that could really achieve all these great things if she put her mind to it, not just in the house, but in terms of crafting something exciting. When, it's so crazy because that happened later in the show after Rex, but earlier in the show, she basically came to him and she was like, oh, I think I'm going to start like a cookbook and I've got all these ideas. And she was really passionate. And he basically shit on her for it. Like, he didn't really support it. He thought it was dumb. He fundamentally didn't think that she was capable of achieving all of her wildest dreams. He wasn't her biggest cheerleader, and he didn't support her. And I think even earlier on in dating, you don't even have to be married again. Like, this is just such a red flag behavior, husband or boyfriend. Like, I 100% have had someone I'm dating, I just can't remember the incident now, say that to me, but something similar along those lines where I share an ambitious goal and they're like, oh, are you sure? Like, that job market's really saturated. Like, you know, it's very, very difficult to succeed in that industry. Sure, like, you can do that. I mean, that could be, how do you know you'll succeed? And they just say something where it's like, if you're not fully 110% in, you're out. Like, especially if you're always encouraging their career and supporting them and they're like, oh, like, really? And they're sort of casting doubt on your ability to succeed. It's like, why would you really want to be with someone that doesn't hype you up and make you feel like you can achieve anything and believes in your wildest dreams even more than you do? Otherwise, it just feels like a very subtle way of basically shitting on your confidence or trying to make you question yourself. Like, no, you're not all that. Like, think again, you're not all that. And it's very, very demoralizing, especially if it's someone whose feedback you really, really value, and so you need, in a sense, that encouragement from them. Like, you need to know that they support you. It feels really, really shit. But that's another thing about Rex, is he was ungrateful, right? He didn't believe in her and he resented her perfectionism, but yet he never actually communicated what he needed or what he wanted either. He never actually tried to fix the intimacy issue he had with Bree. He just went and outsourced it from other places rather than, again, communicating with her. In therapy, he blamed her for everything, even when he was keeping secrets and betraying her. He was very, very emotionally immature, and he was using silence against her rather than just communicating openly and kindly what he wanted from her. I'm not saying he was evil, but I don't think that he was a good partner for her, and he was definitely not on her level.
Any word from the bridal party?
They're still in the bride's room. You know women. They're probably in there fussing about mascara and blush.
He did not hack her up and dissolve the pieces in acid.
The final man we have is Orson, who I like to call... Well, actually, I need a name for him. I like to call him the tiresome one, because Orson didn't really improve at a fast enough rate for my liking. Now, I've always thought that he was the best one out of all of the partners, but it feels like they kind of did a big switch up on his character when Bree was in a really, really good place, and they had him mess up a lot with her to sort of damage her confidence and bring her down. Or maybe when the relationship was feeling too good and too in a solid place, they didn't really want her to stay happy, or the writers thought they needed more drama, so they chose to incorporate more obstacles into the relationship, because there was a stage where they were like a power couple and they were functioning very, very well together. So it's kind of a shame that was messed up. But even so, I still feel like from the beginning there were a lot of problems with Orson, and the way that his character deteriorated at the end and he just got worse and worse and worse, and his behavior escalated more and more, was not cute, it was not funny, and it honestly became extremely exhausting to watch because he just was not learning anything. He was someone who seemed to be refined and like the perfect match for Bree, but he was hiding this whole dark past. He was very secretive, very manipulative, slippery, and just lying about a lot of things and not being honest about who he was. Which I feel like leading a relationship with dishonesty in any capacity, whether it's not really being upfront about your financial situation or your job or your family and hiding stuff, I just don't think it's a great way to go. He covered up crimes like running over Mike and leaving him for dead, and constantly kept secrets. And again, he wasn't very upfront with sharing that information either. And he also was whinging a lot. He turned into a big man-child by the end, and he didn't like it when doing things like running someone over left him with consequences. Like, he wanted to do these bad things but not have consequences for it. Like after running Mike over, but Bree's like, if you love me, I feel like you would just go to jail and take some responsibility. Now, was that too much of an ask? Who knows? That's a different story. Maybe she shouldn't have asked at all, but he chose to do it knowing he'd be going to jail for a crime he genuinely committed that was absolutely fucked up and wrong on every level. But the interesting thing is then when he comes back and he's finding it difficult to get a job, and he's getting annoyed that Bree's earning more than him or that she's more successful than him, he feels emasculated, and he's actually getting mad at her. Like, he's annoyed because he doesn't know his place and he doesn't know how to sit in these feelings of discomfort. Again, I absolutely cannot stand this. Your failure as a man is not your wife's problem. Don't make her feel bad for succeeding and for achieving something because you, with your own choices, messed up your own life and now you're mad about it. Don't be mad about it. And if you're gonna be mad, go and cry in the corner, but don't go and get mad at her, because Bree genuinely wanted to help him and support him, but she wanted to know that he'd actually learned something and that he'd taken some responsibility for his actions. She didn't want to have regrets in the relationship. She wanted him to think about what he'd done. Why is he getting mad about having genuine consequences for his behavior? Don't do it in the first place then. He's then annoyed that she's earning and she's doing better than him. Why is he so easily emasculated? Again, if she's doing well in her career, he should be happy for her. And this just reminded me, especially like if you're actually dating in real life, like not just in a TV show, but for real, like you're dating someone and you're like quite a happy, confident person, or you've achieved a lot of things and you feel good about your life overall. Like, no one feels amazing about their life, but you feel good about it overall. And you notice that the person you're dating feels like they're failing, or their life's a bit of a mess and they haven't sorted out some things. They don't feel like they're the best version of themselves and they're just very, very insecure. Maybe they seem like kind of the jealous type, or they don't feel great about themselves. You can't date them, because you literally cannot fix them no matter how hard you try, and an insecure person will drag you down to their level. Like, they will drag you down into the mud with them because they won't be comfortable at some point seeing you shine, or it will make them worry that maybe you're going to find someone better. So it's going to be scary for them to see you succeed, because in a way, like Tom was with Lynette, they're going to be subconsciously competing with you and trying to figure out how they're going to outrank you, or who's doing better or who's doing worse. Especially for someone like Orson, it was a massive ego death for him, because he started out as this really refined doctor or whatever with this amazing reputation and everyone loved him. So it was a massive blow to his identity to figure out who he was when nobody really cared about him anymore, and he wasn't like a big shot. He wasn't this famous career guy. And Bree was giving him tasks and stuff. She was paying him, she was giving him things to do, and that still wasn't enough for him. But again, like, it's not her fault if you're emasculated. And I feel like a lot of the men in this show were having a problem or an insecurity, and they were basically then just immediately dumping it on their wife and making it their wife's problem to fix. So now the wife is the caretaker, the therapist, the one doing all the emotional labor, and now it's her responsibility apparently to help you. But like, this was not Bree's problem to fix, like, at all. She had nothing to do with it. When Bree started her catering company and published her cookbook, Orson really resented her independence, and he tried to sabotage her success out of security. And again, this really worries me with dating someone that's insecure, because Orson was quite insecure and he had a lot of insecurities that were subtle at first. Is if you know that someone is insecure, how long do you have to wait to see how much damage they can cause to your career? Like, at one point, is it sort of unacceptable to wait for them, you know? Because he just would have kept dragging her down. And when Bree wanted to get rid of him, he couldn't even respect her with that. Like, he used all this emotional guilt to try and stay in her life, even when she genuinely no longer trusted or wanted him. He was just extremely manipulative at the end, extremely clingy, and he kept trying to like weasel his way back into her life when he fundamentally hadn't healed. Like, I understand if he healed, improved, became a better person, and then came back to her and was like, look, I'm better now, I've worked on myself, like, here I am. But he was still very much like damaged, hadn't worked on himself whatsoever, but he was still coming back and thinking that he had some sort of shot with her, or that they could like work in it together and that she would keep him. The interesting thing is that Bree ended up being a lot more confident than Orson. She ended up succeeding him in terms of her career. She ended up outracing him in terms of her confidence and her achievements and her accomplishments. She ended up being more confident than him as a whole and doing more self-development, like becoming a better and stronger and more compassionate person. And the funny thing is that he was below her, like she was out of his league. And the funny thing is, when they first met, it seemed like a good match. Like, he seemed to match her image on the surface, but then he actually couldn't handle her power and he punished her for growing. Like, it seemed like on paper these two were kind of roughly suited for each other, and she met him and thought, oh yeah, this is like a proper gentleman, like this is the kind of guy that I deserve. But A, he didn't end up being a gentleman, and B, he wasn't as successful and polished as he appeared. And I thought this was such a clever thing that the show did, is to depict someone that looks on the surface like they have everything that you need because they're very well groomed and they present very well and they're well spoken and they seem respectful. But then as you like get to know them more, you realize that actually they ain't shit and you're still out of their league, and they've got like a lot of emotional problems and secrets and things that they need to work on. And I think Bree found this really hard to get her head around and adjust to, because she thought she was meeting her prince, like her gentleman, like a genuine gentleman. I was talking about this with my friend the other day, because we were saying that sometimes it's hard to know like who's on your level and who's like a true gentleman, because they could be like a lad masquerading as a gentleman. That's the phrase she used. Like, they seem like they've kind of got their shit together and they know how to be respectful and how to treat a woman and how to just show up correctly. But then you get to know them more, and actually they're not speaking gently and with respect. Like, they fundamentally just don't know how to relate to women in a normal way. And it can be a real shock because you had this idea of who they were and how they would treat you in your head, and like that they were this really cool, like confident person, and they ended up not being that. I think also Orson had a lot of moral hypocrisy because he seemed to present as this principled man, and he talked a lot about being this kind of principled, gentlemanly man, but then he's committing these deeply unethical and immature acts that really contradict how he thinks of himself and how he presents himself. Orson basically blackmailed Bree into giving him a job and was threatening her over it. It wasn't just like a little insecurity he had, or a little insecurity, or maybe a little fear, or feeling a bit lonely, or feeling a bit undervalued. His struggle with not being respected and not having a career was seen as like the most agonizing, horrific experience that anyone could go through, as something just completely intolerable, that his wife would be the breadwinner, to kind of an extreme. And he built the relationship with her based on lies. Like, he would come forward only when he was pushed or the truth was about to come out, or when she was suspecting something, but he wasn't leading up front from the start with what was going on and communicating with her. He just wasn't a very good partner. And I feel like at some point, because they wanted Bree to suffer more or have more character development, they made him get really nasty. And he was never that bad at the start, but they made him, oh my God, he was never that bad at the start, but they made him worse. Like, they escalated his bad behavior to make a point, which I really hated. Like, they really exaggerated it and turned it up to 100. So yeah, I wish I could give some sort of advice here overall, but I think the main thing is that everyone has flaws and there's nothing wrong with letting someone know that you've noticed something and you don't love it, and to give some feedback and to see that genuine, like I said, understanding that they've done something wrong, full accountability, and then a change in behavior. And it's normal for love to change people. Like, love does change people, but ultimately I think you need to ask yourself if you like the version of yourself that you are with that person, or if they're making you a worse version of yourself, like more insecure, less friends, feeling bad about yourself. And in a lot of cases with these women, I feel like their husbands were actually making them worse off than when they were single, or being an added burden, causing more stress than they were actually adding joy and value, and just not really trying to make their partners' lives easier. And when I look at it as a whole, I feel like a lot of the time they were either rewarded for their bad behavior or it wasn't properly addressed by the show. And in general, a lot of these men weren't fully facing in the mirror their own flaws and recognizing where they were going wrong. It's like they didn't actually have any understanding, or in Rex's case, they were actually oblivious to what they were doing wrong in the relationship, which I think is possibly even worse than being a knowing perpetrator. It's being so lacking in awareness that you don't actually understand what you're doing. And the thing is, there's nothing you can do to help someone with that. But I don't really like a lot of the way this was written. I think the husbands could be at points the worst parts of the show, because they were just dragging it down, you know? Like, there's a reason why it's called Desperate Housewives, you know what I mean? I definitely think it's interesting how the show's aged, because maybe like in the early 2000s watching this, we may have just found it funny or been a little bit more tolerating. But now when people watch it, they're like, oh, I don't like that, especially because it feels a bit too close to home, because people have genuinely had a relationship with a guy like Tom in the show where they are doing all of this emotional labor, physical labor, domestic labor, and they're going to work, and they're literally dealing with this bum, and the only reason why they're with him is for the name of love, but he's not even like contributing that, and they feel obligated to stay. So for them, it's not even fun to watch because it hits way too close to home, you know? And there's nothing wrong with these men having flaws, of course, and wanting to improve themselves, but a lot of the time they were never actually doing some self-reflection to figure out why that happened. And I think a perfect example is when, for no reason, Carlos had Lynette working for him and he started bullying her and being really vindictive when he found out that she was pregnant and she hadn't told him, which was not her information to share with anyone. Like, honestly, it's like her business, but he thought it was his business, and he was being so mean and treating her terribly over it. And this is someone that's always been very nice to him. He made it his mission to like humiliate her, all the while putting on a smile and pretending nothing was wrong. Even though that situation eventually de-escalated and things calmed down, I don't remember there really being a point, aside from a brief apology, where he really sat down and was like, what happened here? Why did I treat her like that? Like, what's wrong with me? There's just a general lack of full, not partial, responsibility and accountability for the fact that they were the problem a lot of the time, and that they just messed up in general in any capacity, and to really take a good hard look at their own flaws, or to at least be aware of them. Like, why did I do that? Like, why did I behave like that? So I would love to know what you guys think in the comments. You can check out the rest of my Desperate Housewives videos because I've got a whole playlist, and check out my Patreon. It's only $2 a month if you want to support my work, and I'll see you guys for the next video. Bye guys.